Should we start?
Yeah, I guess we should get
Yeah.
started. Okay.
Roxanne. Well,
Yeah.
I can't see everyone's faces, but if you wanted to say hi, I think it's always interesting talking to a group when you can't see who's here. Hi. Oh, hi, everyone. Thanks. You don't have to stay cameraed, but nice to see your face. My name, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Dana Zobs, and I live in Crested, Butte, Colorado. And I had moved to Crested Butte in 1992, was the first year I lived there, and I started working at a restaurant. And I had worked in food my years, kind of formative years growing up in high school in the Washington, D.C. area. I worked in a gourmet market. So before farm to table was popular in the 80s, it was like, gourmet food, things from other countries. And that was what was in, besides oat bran in the 80s. I worked at a gourmet market, and I worked in a kitchen, and when I came to Crested Butte, I really just knew I wanted to be a chef, but I also loved skiing. So I skied and did yoga and loved cooking, but the culinary opportunities in Crested Butte were kind of limited. And at that time, local food, obviously early 90s, nobody was really talking about it, but we did have a few people at the four-way stop there in Crested Butte. We had these guys, enormous brontosaurus, and they were some hippies from Paonia, and brought their produce maybe once, sometimes twice a week, but not much. I mean, the farm stand was kind of a novelty, as some of you might remember. And I felt like my culinary career in Crested Butte was a little limited too. I worked at Penelope's, for those of you who know the place, and I also worked at Angelo's Pizza, and then I had a long stretch at Lil's doing the pastry and sushi bar there. I left Crested Butte in 2002 and moved, this was eye-opening, to the San Francisco Bay Area. And I thought I was going to get out of food, but that was a bad place to try and get out of food. My background, I went to business school, and I'd always wanted to go to culinary school. And that was kind of a big dream of mine, being as I wanted to be a chef, but I had been advised you need a career type degree. And so business school seemed like the right thing. And so I tried to change careers in the Bay Area. And the Bay Area in 2002, I mean, they'd been on to, local and organic, and we were already eating all organic, but seeing the difference in the quality of what we were getting as chefs in the Bay Area, and the year-round availability of produce and fresh meats. We don't go to Kill Floor once or twice a year when you're in the Bay Area. There's constantly meats being processed. And after about a year and a half working an office job, thinking I was going to change careers, I ended up going to culinary school up in Napa Valley at the CIA. And I got a really well-rounded degree in pastry and savory, and it was an accelerated course. It was just an 8-month course, and I worked in kitchens in the city and commuted up to school. And I learned so much and had so much great exposure. And I think it was at that point I decided I need to come back to Colorado because I had driven too much. So upon moving back to Colorado in 2007, I couldn't really go back to restaurants. I had worked in restaurants in San Francisco, and I just felt like it's time to do my own thing. I had the business degree. I've got all this experience now from culinary school, and I ran a kind of a large kitchen in San Francisco. So I started a personal chef business, which Crested Butte back in 2007 wasn't totally ready for. Today, Crested Butte loves personal chefs. I get calls all the time, and the business has grown, and there's 5 chefs that work with me, and we're a great team, and we go all over. We've worked as far as Paonia, Lake City, and Redstone for events and small parties. But in those early years, even back in 2007, we still just had the people at the four-way. And coming from San Francisco, I felt like this is really a disadvantage, because here we are in the summer an hour and 15 minutes from the largest source of organic farming in all of Colorado. And we have nothing here. And I knew just from having friends, you know, we joke, Crested, Butte East and Paonia and Hotchkiss, you know, everybody's kind of retires and moves over there when they're tired. And we have just so much available over there. And at that time, there were people at the four-way and some chatter about a farmer's market. I can't remember, and maybe someone later can tell me what year our farmer's market started, but it was a little bit after I moved back to Crested Butte. And currently no one was bringing produce over. And I had a friend, and her dad lived over there, and he was just a wild man. Jack Reed, for any of you, if you're from the North Fork and remember Jack, passed away a few years ago. Jack and I became fast friends, and I told him that if I could get him to come once a week on the same day, or at least within 2 days, and bring me everything I wanted and needed for my business, that I would make sure that I could get at least $500 in sales. And I, you know, emailed all my friends a big list of what Jack could get. And Jack would like call me, and I'd scribble notes of the prices and what he could get. And then I'd separate it into boxes, and people would come pick it up. And that formula worked for about a year. And a girlfriend of mine was like, you know, what you need to do is have an online platform. And what you need to do is have everybody, and I'm cooking and running a business. And so that all evolved into Farm Runners. And Farm Runners was started as a nonprofit and kind of came from that, and started with Jack was still driving. And then Matt and Emma bought it. For those of you from the North Fork that know those guys, they bought it for $1 from the Office for Resource Efficiency, and they turned it into the wonderful distribution hub that it is today. And that's really mainly what I rely on now. But as that slowly got going, I was still, there were a few CSAs that came over, and I got in touch with them that were dropping CSAs on people's doorsteps, and I would order bulk amounts from them and pick up on people's doorsteps. I mean, sourcing food took more time than cooking, honestly, and still today takes up a good chunk of what I do every day. But I'd say that now it's in a more organized fashion. My little business that used to have to get loaded back into my car and into a commercial kitchen evolved. We had a kitchen in town for about 8 or 9 years, and now we actually, Crested Butte's Personal Chefs owns a space in CB South on the main drag, and we're really proud. It's a big space. We have a huge walk-in and storage, and we have the capacity to hopefully grow, but also to support, you know, what I mean by supporting local farms and ranches means paying the fair price and the fair market value and passing that on to our clients, but also doing it more often and doing it in bigger volume, so that all these small, wonderful farmers and ranchers that are in our region can grow and be successful and can be supported at the price that they need to pay. My business mainly is a catering business. My dream of it being a personal chef business, you know, is just, I'd say it's on the forefront of taking off. We do a large majority of what I call personal chef works, where a family of 6 to 15 calls and they want a chef and a server at the home. We cook in our commercial kitchen, and then we bring it to their house and finish it in front of them. COVID was a huge hit to all of us, this business, mainly because of the catering side, people not having parties. So I would say we drastically lost the meat and potatoes on our plate. And if you're just, I know some of us are vegan, but just living off salad, it's pretty empty. You know, you crave something more. And we have skimmed by, and we're really excited. We did not go into a deficit. We did receive a PPP, and we continued to buy local food. We did find other resources during COVID, you know, in times where people just weren't, where our business couldn't support it. And we did start a whole nother business. We started a Meals to Go program and what I call an online farmers market with our own value-added products. So we sell whatever's in season. We don't sell everything like Farm Runners does. We talk to farmers, and we we obviously know what's in season and whatever the main thing is. Like, think about right now, what am I getting? Milk, some eggs, some hoop house lettuce, and some potatoes from last fall. And that's about it. And so that's all that's on our market. And otherwise, we reach out to find Colorado producers that provide cheeses and salamis and milk, and then our value-added products, which we use those things to make. If we can't get local ingredients, I think, this is what I mean about the balance. I know I called it the balance of cooking at 9,000 feet for one. Getting food at a remote location at 9,000 feet. And I would say whether you're at 9,000 feet or 6,000 feet, you're at, Blue Mesa, or you're at Hotchkiss, Paonia, even Carbondale, you're not in the San Francisco Bay Area, and you're not in Denver, and you just can't get everything that you want all the time. And there's a delay, or there's okay, I need a plan B. And that's where, as a chef, I find the balance. We don't have any set menus at all, ever. And people always say, okay, just send me your menus and pricing. And what we tend to do is we start by figuring out where one, they're eating. Does the place have a kitchen? Are we cooking inside? And then we think about what's in season, what can I get at a decent price to offer these people, and what's most important to have from our local providers at this time of year. It's midwinter, and we know that animals usually go to the kill floor either in the spring and the fall. So we're not really abundant right now. Everybody's mostly sold out. So I have to check whatever I have to stock up in the fall and the spring on meats. And then as far as produce, we offer them what we have, and then we go towards organic sources. And that's where the balance comes in. I went to a live talk in Berkeley once with Michael Pollan and the founder of Whole Foods, John Mackey. And this was one of the most heated, craziest debates. The place was packed. And the debate was so juicy because it was really about, what's more important? Is local important, or is it organic important? And none of us want chemicals in our food. But I think what it all came down to, and the two of them never agreed. I mean, can you imagine those two? On stage, neither one ever agreed with the other. But the point that came across, I don't want to buy a mango from Peru. It's just something that really turns me off, the amount of travel. And I would start with my local providers. Then I move out to the wider Colorado region. I'd say that now the San Luis Valley and more of the western slope, like Delta and Grand Junction. And even as far as the eastern slope of Colorado, I'm getting some meat from Levada, Colorado, although some of you might know her. She's a chef from Boulder who moved there and is living out her ranching dream. And she has amazing grass-fed, grass-finished beef. And so I think even though we have a really huge state, I think it's a small community of producers. And I don't think that driving around Colorado is necessarily as bad. And especially because we've got farm runners that's doing this legwork for us. Some farmers do still come over, and I talk to them too. We deal with, it was an Austin family, and they were bought by Mountain Freshies. And so they'll come over, we'll still buy some of their stuff. But I think that keeping it cohesive, and I like one thing for me as a chef and keeping this balance is instead of spending half of every day figuring out where I'm going to source food for the next day and the next 5 days and the next 10 days, is to have some sort of systems and regularity into my life. So we typically spend Monday and Tuesdays at the computer planning what to order by Thursdays and Fridays that will receive the final next Thursdays and Fridays from different vendors. We receive food from Mountain Roots, which is down in Gunnison. A lot of our Gunnison providers have their own days they come, and that works great for us because it's local and we are there every day. I would say Gunnison is our local and North Fork is our wider local, and then the extended, meaning the San Luis and the Western Slope, and even as far as Levada, I have friends that grow in Buena Vista that have had hoop houses there for years. And so I'll get produce near and far, but bringing it back to balance is you can't spend all your day, if you're going to have a successful business in the food industry, you just can't spend all your days sourcing food. I have to cut off the time that I spend on the phone or in the emails and texting and writing emails and figuring how the cost is going to apply on next week's menu. So it is a real balance. And we've started using the Cisco truck, which is new. We used to only buy things like our cleaning supplies and to-go boxes from them. And now we do get organic, it's a Boulder flour from them. We get some organic sugar. And I find the more I push with these big trucks, and even though I think I've spent my whole working career now, almost 28 years trying not to use these trucks. But I think the more I push, the more I can find things, the more my reps are like, well, this is a Colorado product and nobody's buying it because it's so expensive, but I thought you might. And it's not that we like to buy everything so expensive, but I truly believe that if you support the price and if more people buy, then it's going to go down. So I am looking further than our North Fork. And what happens with the catering business versus the personal chef business is that we need volume. People are going to start this summer having bigger events again. And weddings, as you guys all know, the mountain communities are just growing and getting huge. And they want to have bigger and bigger and fancier weddings. And so we need volume. And small organic farmers can't always support that. So that's the fun part of, I'm sure everyone's noticed, menus have gotten kind of ambiguous. Like you don't even really know what you're getting. It's this, grass-fed ribeye and then a list of 4 ingredients. You don't know how they're prepared or what they're doing. And that trend is really cool for a chef like me. That allows me to just put these things and then I can just put the word greens. And if everybody's telling me there was a problem and there's no kale and there's no Swiss chard and all you can get is mustard greens, well, mustard greens it is. And the client doesn't always know what we're getting into, and they're usually pleasantly surprised. And if I have to cut in something I get from what I call these extraneous sources, like the big truck or UNFI, which honestly, I would rather use Cisco product organic than support UNFI. And I'm not sure, you guys can ask questions anytime, but they're a challenging company to work with. And I actually go to City Market a lot. I find that their case prices and their price of organic produce, I know it's coming from big ag, but if I can't get it local and a client needs something, that's a lot of times where I go to get it. The hardest is probably dairy, getting organic dairy at a price that's sustainable for me. We get milk, but as far as heavy cream and butter, which I'm the kind of chef that uses a lot of heavy cream and butter, we don't make sauces with it, but we do love baking. That is a hard one, and price-wise, it's pretty expensive. But otherwise, we make all our menus. Our goal is to focus on what's available. And after almost 30 years of watching what is available and when, we just don't offer anything with peaches in June. It's not there. We don't have it. And we don't offer a whole lot in June. And we're starting to have weddings earlier and earlier. We've had weddings as early as May. This year they start in June. And so it's hard to find produce in June. We try and preserve things. I still have a few half-gallon mason jars of tomatoes from last year, but I doubt they'll make it to the June weddings. So yeah, the balance is interesting, but I think we have so many more opportunities than we did 15 years ago. And between the farmers markets and all the new farms and ranches, and as far as the Crested Butte Gunnison area, our Gunnison providers, the Producers Guild, and all that they've done in Mountain Roots and the farms that are growing with them. I mean, we buy a lot locally, as much as we can. And we try and supplement and add things in. And I guess our new business with the market and the meals has added kind of another cash flow way that we can buy in more bulk and support the farmers and also support the other side of the business, which is catering and chefing, because we couldn't really, I would say on average, I could use anywhere from 1 to 3 pounds of salad. And come June 1st, I will consistently be able to buy 10 to 15 pounds of salad until October 5th. And I will use it all and run out. And 10 to 15 pounds of salad is a good amount. I had a standing order with the Paonia provider for 10 pounds all summer last year, and I needed to buy more. So I'm going to, move up. And that's just salad. I'd say on, we're not a restaurant, so we don't have the volume, the case count that a restaurant, and we don't have the regular orders like an inventory. So the last thing about the balance is one thing I've gotten involved with is a Denver-based nonprofit called the Good Food 100. And they really focus on what is good food, and to me, this balance all comes back to good food tastes good and you feel good. The old school thing, like you are what you eat. We are what we eat, and we don't feel good. This is just so silly. We all know this. You wouldn't be here listening to this, but we don't feel good after we go to McDonald's. If you ever go to McDonald's, I have an 11-year-old. I am forced to McDonald's every now and then. And it's really funny because he's kind of sick after. And I giggle and, oh, sorry you don't feel good. But you are what you eat. And you can do an experiment like that and let your kid eat McDonald's and see what happens later. Or you can say, oh, look, here's this organic mass-produced apple. And here's this apple that was picked last fall that's kind of half of it's rotting in my walk-in. But let's just see what tastes better. And it tastes better. And people will say, oh, why, Dana? Why is it so delicious? And it's really because the food tastes good. And back to the Good Food 100, what they're saying is, yes, buy local, buy organic, but think broader. What do I do when I get to olive oil? Is anyone in Colorado making olive oil? Where do I go? What do I do? Well, I know a small producer from where I used to live in Berkeley. I like the company. After shopping with them for 20 years, the president of the company always shoots me a little email saying, hey, Dana, thanks for being a good customer. I checked in. There was rumor that they were using Roundup 5 years ago, and I stopped buying, and they called me. And I said, why? And they said, well, we'll call you when we get through this disaster that we faced, and hopefully our business survives. And I said, I'm sorry, I can't purchase until you're organic again. And now they're back, and I solely use organic California olive oil. I like Stonehouse olive oil. I like the taste. I will buy from UNFI like Napa Valley Naturals, but I will not buy Italian olive oil. We just don't need that kind of, and this goes back to, Michael Pollan and John Mackey. Is it worth the air freight and all of that to get these exotic ingredients? Do you really need it? Is your food delicious? Is it good? And does it taste good? And it does. It tastes really good. And yes, there are certain things there might be, I can't think of what the ingredient might be, but there are things that come from far away, but not too many. We really try and source our, Utah salt and our, sugar. Yeah, organic sugar from Cisco truck, Rachel. And it is wholesome foods. And I bet you it's from somewhere around the equator, and that might come on a plane. That's a tough one. And so we just stay consistent and stick with organic. I mean, that's where the balance comes in. We can start digging around and, chocolate chips even, you want that quality. Do you just stick with it? Look into the company. Is it a good company? Did Hershey's buy it? Yes, Hershey's bought Ghirardelli. It's true. And so maybe you move on to a different one. Oh, It's Wholesome Foods. I'd have to look at my invoice and I can text you or email you. It says it's like Wholesome Foods, and I get it off the Cisco truck in a 50-pound bag, and it's organic sugar.
Do you have a suggestion for people who are trying to like source locally and design menus for just like their families? Like you do it on a large scale, but how would you recommend to design like your buying, purchasing for your, just you and your family?
So one thing that I do, because I do have to shop for the family too and think ahead, is I really enjoy the weekly Farm Runners sends me this little blurb. And even though I shop from all over, I use Mountain Roots and Producers Guild and you guys, and I use that to kind of give me a clue. I know there's microclimates and everybody's blooming and blossoming at different times, but it really gives me a broader idea of what's coming. And also, I've always been a fan of a freezer in the garage, and when things are in season and the price of peaches or tomatoes drops from $4 to $2, you buy 3 cases and you process them. And when the meats are going to the kill floor and it's time to stock up, I stock up. So my weekly family meal planning, and family meal is like the funny name I've called my business that does the meals, but it's also what I do at home. And every week as a full-time working mom, I have to, wake up Sunday morning thinking about how I'm going to get through the week and what I'm going to pull. And I start pulling things and I look at what's going bad and what's coming in from Farm Runners this week, and not what's going bad, but what in your fridge needs to be used. Can you use it as a marinade? Can you mash it up in potatoes and bake it? Because we always have potatoes. It seems like they're kind of the first thing. We've always got, it's Gunnison, right? We had potatoes and ice was our main product years ago. That was Gunnison's product. So I tend to look ahead and I pull 2 to 3 meats, and I hope that in the 5-day work week that one meat carries me for 1 leftovers and the next meat carries me for another leftovers, and the other one makes tacos on Friday. And then I see what's coming in fresh on Thursdays for us. We tend to just look ahead and see what's coming, and I try and buy big, and if I have Sundays off, because in the summers I tend to work 7 days. So luckily, that's lucky and unlucky. I tend to have leftovers on Sunday, Mondays from jobs. But when I don't, like in the winters, I tend to just really stock up and cook bigger. And I even do things like with braised meats. I see what kind of fresh vegetables are coming by reading Farm Runners. And I think if any of you are producers, I really appreciate, and I just delete them. I don't really read the whole thing, but people have told me too, we can all manage our inboxes now. I appreciate the MailChimp little newsletters that come out weekly. I noticed that Calder just started one this week. We send one just saying what our soups and our markets are. And I think it helps people know, reading those things, and I know Mountain Roots does it, just letting people know what's coming down the horizon. And it's not MailChimp, but Farm Runners does a weekly right after you get your delivery on Thursday. And I know you can get their emails even if you're a home cook as well. And you can get these emails and it just says, hey, what's on the horizon? In the summer when things are really busy, they say like what's going out and needs to be sold, like in the grocery business, we call the culls, and so we get to know that. My start was in grocery, and I feel like I'm, when I was 14 in the gourmet market world, 14 years old, and now I'm 48 and I'm like back, I have a little market, and things like culls, you can use them at home, see what's cheap and they're trying to get rid of right now. Last fall's apples they're done, and make tons of applesauce and cakes. And meat is something in Colorado, unfortunately, and fortunately, you just fill your freezer. And I like variety, and luckily all of our local ranchers have a lot of smaller ways to buy now. It used to be we could only buy a half or a quarter. So, any other questions, you guys?
Yeah, we have a pretty small group, so if anyone wants to turn on their camera and their microphone, feel free to ask questions.
Hi.
Hi, Rachel.
I am curious about how you deal with, like, especially having a background a few decades, like a couple decades ago in the restaurant business when like the customer is always right. Yes, let's get you whatever you want. And I recently, like you, I only work with fresh fruit. I make my own preserves and fillings and that kind of thing. And even from the grocery store, you can't get cherries in January. And I recently had someone who wanted a Black Forest cake, and I had to say no. And, because I'm not going to buy a can of cherry filling. And how do you, like, talk to me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, so like cherries, that's an easier one because Big B's sells the pitted tart cherries all year round. So, but I also buy them by the 27-pound thing, and then I process and I have my little cherry filling. But I do have a situation, and I am of the 80s restaurant chef world of the customer is always right. I mean, I was trained in some hardcore customer service. And I am a yes woman, and being a personal chef, I've worked at, I got turned on to it. This is so crazy town. Is I was working in San Francisco, and a friend had a connection and brought me to the Getty's home. And this is old world San Francisco. There's front of the house, back of the house. There were smaller hallways for the back of the house. It was eye-opening. And this is where the world of yes evolves. And I'm trained in the world of yes. And Rachel, I still do it. I have a client in the beginning of June, and when people say to me, she wants people walking around with oysters on a tray, I find oysters and I have them shipped and overnighted. Yeah. But I try to find sustainable fisheries. And there's a couple things. I have a friend in the fishing industry who lives in Seattle who started a sustainable, just to talk about seafood as one subject, because that's a big can of worms for us in the mountains, right? Because everybody wants trout and there's no trout sold commercially. And we all, if you fish, we catch and release. I mean, that's what we do. Every now and then at the Mesa, I'll keep a salmon, but I seek out sustainable fisher people. And my girlfriend in Seattle works for a .org that has a resource for people all over the country to find just sockeye salmon. But through that, I found other people. And actually this weekend, I don't know if you guys can see them in a hotel in Aspen for my kids' hockey. And I have found through that website, there is a fisherman in Carbondale. And on my way home from Carbondale, I'm going to buy 100 pounds of salmon and stock up, because my friend from Seattle used to live in Crested, Butte, and she was my source for sustainable sockeye. And now she's gone, and Matt Beck left Gunnison. And so here I am in Carbondale. I'm going to buy 100 pounds of sockeye, split it with farm runners. They'll be selling it at their station, and then I'll be able to offer it all summer. But oysters, so now I'm going to spend half my morning on Monday honestly just finding a sustainable source and having it overnight shipped. I do get cheese from California. I use Tamales Bay Foods because they do a lot of work in finding sustainable dairies and cured meats, beautiful product, and they overnight ship to us as well. And so I do
then
that.
Maybe you can segue a little bit into this is a big thing for me, and I think for you and everyone here, is like how to kind of change the mindset and sort of train the consumer that, like, yeah, so you're gonna pay for it, and I just think that it's such an opportunity to be supportive of local and sustainable food and vote with our dollars, so to speak. And I always think about the statistic. I think the United States of America is like on the bottom of a list of the percentage of our GDP that we spend on food. Like, Americans spend very little of our income on food compared to the rest of the world. But yeah, so maybe you can talk about
that's a hard one.
Prices and,
Yeah, so the problem is that you can go, I'll just speak your language. You can go to City Market and get a cupcake for 67 cents.
Yeah.
And you can decorate that and have it say, happy birthday to Susie, and all the stuff that would take you and I a whole day to do for a party of 40. And so there is no competition. So you don't have to make your prices match that. You know, your price should match that of San Francisco, because the cost of living where we live is the same. And the cost of living in the Gunnison Crested Butte area is matching Carbondale, where I'm sitting right now. It's crazy. So we have to make our pricing match what we're paying. And there's a formula for food costs, and we have to stand strong. And if they don't want to pay it, then they'll end up with City Market. And a lot of times now that there's so much business here, there's so much work and demand for catering and a baker and all of that, I think you can just say, if my pricing doesn't work for you, that's okay. Just here's the cheapest option. You can go to City Market and get a vegetable tray with hummus for 30 cents a person. That might work. And I do that because I think that the person who wants to pay for the quality and the good food, they're out there.
Yeah.
And they'll come back to us, because those people, I've had people say to me, oh, you're crazy, your pricing's crazy, we're not fancy, we're not going to hire you. I said, well, I'm not fancy at all. There's nothing fancy. I know how to cook classic French, but I don't do it. It's the ingredients and it's the time it takes to make from scratch. And so why don't you go shopping and cook all that and then come back if you'd ever like to treat yourself. And I've had people tell me, you know, God, after the $200 I spent at the store and the 2 days I spent prepping, it would have been worth the $45 a person that you offered, you know, which is cheap. I think I've learned to get a little tougher and stand by my pricing. And things like the shipping I talk about, I fully pass that on to the client. So the oysters, or I did a couple of guys got married a few years ago and they had to have lobster rolls. So I did research on sustainable lobster fishermen in Maine, and I called them and I asked it, they overnighted and they had a program already, like I wasn't rewriting the wheel, and they shipped it and I paid the shipping and I passed it on. Not as an item, just within the meal cost.
Right. It's
just going to cost, and it should, you know. And pastry work is so time consuming.
Yeah, it's
butter is so expensive. So
I'm really barely doing it anymore, because especially with how limited I'm doing, like, I mean, I'll buy a 50-pound bag of sugar because it's sugar and it'll last, but I'm just not gonna buy. I did until not last summer, but the summer before I bought flats and flats and flats of fruit and processed and processed and processed, but it's just like,
yeah,
you make 3 apple pies.
Right.
For me, you know, that's where I'm at right now.
Yeah.
Anyways. But yeah, it's just such it feels really delicate for me, I guess. Like, I feel like I want to be an advocate for voting with your dollars, and this is why you're going to pay extra, because I'm paying extra because this is local and organic, and this is why blah, blah, blah. But yeah, you are still going to have the people who just want to go to City Market.
I think those people will always be there, just like they'll give in and go to the drive-thru at McDonald's. Like, I vote with my dollars. I try and support all the time. And I think with food, the economy of scale helps.
Yes.
You know, so
again, that's why I'm barely doing.
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard to do on a small scale. And when I did it on a small scale and I drove my Subaru around with all my dry ingredients and a cooler, and then I used someone's kitchen, and it's never worth it.
No.
Peggy, did you have a question? I saw you popped up. We have 5 more minutes, so if you want to jump in with a question.
Yeah, you know, you actually touched on it. Hey, Dana, I just met you the other night at Mountain Rouge.
Yeah. Hi, Peggy.
Touched on it, actually. That's been my frustration with finding sustainable seafood that still tastes good, that tastes fresh. And that's a big frustration I have here. So I'm going to look into some of these areas that you've talked about, but that was one thing I just wanted to hear a little more about.
So you want to know an interesting thing for the home consumer? For seafood? This is huge for me, because I did all this research with my girlfriend Frances, right? that lives in Seattle and works for the .org, and I can send you the link. But I found this Sitka salmon shares, and I looked at everybody's sites and I read what they're all about. And what she says is she did the research to put them on the website because she knows all the fisheries in Alaska. She grew up there. Her parents, her sister, they all run fishing boats. And really it's about the processing, because some of these plants take your fish and you don't know what you're getting back.
Right.
And so it costs more to get the seafood to be followed all the way through. Kind of like when you take your elk to be processed, like you want to know you're getting your elk. Like you don't want it to get lost in the shuffle. So as someone who's, you know, I've never been a person who gets any deals in the ski industry, right? But I've always gotten deals in food because I've always worked in food. I read all this information about sustainable fishing, how hard it is, how it has taken the hardest hit of any in the food industry. We used to work with a company called Sea to Table, and they don't even sell to wholesale anymore. They took such a hit with COVID. So I read all this and I get through it, I'll digest it. I just committed to 6 months of a seafood share from Sitka Salmon Shares at full price. I didn't call them and ask for wholesale like I usually do. I want to support the program of the fishermen getting the money and knowing that they have basically 6 months at $115 a month. I get 5 pounds of seafood, anything from halibut, mostly salmons, because it's, you know, Sitka, it's the region, but there's whitefish, there's orange fish, and a little bit of crab. And honestly, it made me feel good. It made me feel like I'm voting with my dollars and I'm not trying to get a deal like the chef that I am. And I'm excited. It starts this April and I'm going to get a box to my home and we're going to eat seafood again.
That's good to know.
Yeah.
Alexis, thank you for posting.
Oh, thanks for sending that Sitka Salmon Shares. And I'll send my friend Francis's .org. I'd have to look up through my texts with her to find it. But that one just has all different salmon from wherever you are. And I just happened to find this guy in Carbondale. So soon you'll be able to buy through farm runners at their Hotchkiss station salmon from.
Great. Thanks.
Yeah, sure.
Kimberly has a question. She says, can you share how you work at organizing your food resources? Do you use an app or do you have a handwritten routine?
Yeah, good question. I kind of have a handwritten routine. I've used food like recipe apps before when I worked in large, I worked for Whole Foods in San Francisco. And so I was using apps and sites and working closely with UNFI and different things. And honestly, what works for me is I take a half a day with all the menus for the next month. And then I create a sourcing list with all my different, it's handwritten. And then I go online and I do all my ordering online with farm runners. I email smaller producers from Gunnison and online with Cisco. And so I get all that done on Monday, Tuesdays, and on Thursdays and Friday. It is a handwritten. I don't use anything digital, but my recipes are digital, but nothing gets done twice. None of my menus are standard.
Awesome, thank you. We only have a minute. Any last questions? Or if not, we can go ahead and sign off. Thanks so much for your time. We really appreciate it.
Here comes, wait, I just found it. So this is the .org that my friend works for she kind of does the research for you. So if you don't live in Colorado by chance and you're looking for other areas in Colorado, you can just put in your location and find it for fish.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah.